This is Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready. We're about to live in your head rent-free.
Good morrow, Otterites. I am Martin.
And I'm Robert.
I'm Francis.
I am Marcus.
So, Brother Andre couldn't be with us today. He's on a pilgrimage to, I think, was it Winnipeg or some other damn cold place?
Trixie's.
And he's
It's gone.
he's feeding the poor in Winnipeg, I think it is.
Is he laying groundwork for the annexation, maybe?
He could be an advanced agent. Checking out economic conditions while he does good works for the church.
Now be careful. Don't piss them off. Canada may invade us and take us over.
Well, that'd be a tragedy because you know what kind of weather they have.
I know.
That's right.
And we'd all have to start eating that round bacon.
Oh, hell no.
Hell with that.
Hell no.
And mayonnaise on everything, fries included.
Yeah, they could take their poutine and stick it.
Poutine is supposed to be very good, but I've never had it, to be perfectly
I'll
honest.
just stick with French fries.
Yeah.
Without.
But where are we today? Because let's give credit where credit is due.
Yes. So we're ensconced.
And Cajun is holding back the floodwaters in New Haven.
Yes, I was getting ready to get to Cajun as soon as with Brother Andre.
Sorry, jumped the gun.
And Cajun is not with us as well because there's cannons and bales of hay and floodwaters and he's holding off.
Dogs and cats living together in mass hysteria.
He's holding off the British in New Orleans. But
He's now part of the dike.
He's not in New Orleans, but it's close because he's going to float away in New Haven. But yes, we're ensconced here at Studio F, awesomely, here very comfortably as we do episode 242.
Yeah, main floor of the Baxter Building.
Yes, we had a very nice lunch, thick
did.
Dagwood kind of sandwiches, the ones that you can actually bite into.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yep. So, do we want to get started? Are we ready to go?
Roll that beautiful.
Absolutely, Captain.
All right. So, this episode is a little different. We called it History's Douchebags.
Kind of the opposite of our heroes.
Yeah. Yep. And that's kind of purposeful in that these are, of course, not people you want to emulate or study as heroes, but it's very important, I feel, that what they did and how they screwed up the world
Yes,
should not be forgotten.
absolutely.
And these are two fellas that, because they're essentially losers, on the stage, world stage, that they're kind of forgotten about.
Yeah, you might know the second, but I can almost guarantee you dang well don't know the first.
Yeah, because he did get his comeuppance pretty much. He got what he deserved. So the first fella is Dragutin Dimitrijević, and the second fella is Phillipe Petain.
That's right.
Or Marshal Petain. So we'll jump into Dimitrijević here. So, listeners, as you know, World War I's kind of one of those things that we started out this whole mess with.
Yep.
As kind of our launching point. And then Robert requested we not touch it again.
For a while, we spent an awful... Because what listeners think, well, it wasn't that many episodes. No, but you have to understand, listeners, we had spent how many years on World War I before we started the podcast?
Essentially show prep.
Francis and I did like 10 years of show prep to kind of wore Robert out on this. On the topic.
And it's not that I wasn't interested in the topic. It's just that I had stuff going on. I wasn't able to keep up with the same reading you guys were doing. Yeah. So I was always feeling like playing catch up.
Well, yeah, because it is insanely complicated.
It is. And I agree in the importance of it. Absolutely. World War I shaped the rest of the 20th century. Absolutely.
Right. And continues to shape the 21st.
Yeah.
And so when you start talking about, well, how in the world did we get to the point where every country in Europe was shooting at each other? And not only there, but then transporting the whole thing to places like Africa and China and everywhere else. Well, part of that reason that it all started is this guy. Dragutin Dimitrijević.
You might go so far as, now there's lots of players and lots of blame. But once we tell his story, I think you realize this guy here might be the one that shares the most.
And, I mean, douchebag is the right word.
Yeah, that is a Martinism. He's the one that came up with the title of this idea. You've been wanting to talk about this dude for
a long
time.
time.
For a long time.
Yeah.
And we've kicked it down, and finally.
Yeah, we're coming up with good stuff, so we kicked the can on this one, but I think it's time.
Well, I also think this is not meant to be a one-off either. We're going to find douchebags all over the place because let's face it, it's easy to find.
History's
douchebags.
full of them. Yeah.
History's full of them. So this
Absolutely.
So this should be a fun episode, I hope. But that's all on the able captain sitting over here, Martin.
So, who Dimitrijević was, and again, this amplifies the douchebaggery pretty well. He was a colonel in the Serbian army. He was head of military intelligence.
Francis, keep going.
Oh, so he's, in a position that's very important, but at the same time, he's also head of what's called the Black Hand, which is a terror organization, essentially. It's what you would call an irredentist organization in that.
You hit the button there on that one, dude.
Yeah.
Because that's
Word boner.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's
so an irredentist is, this is somebody who wants to expand Serbia at the expense of other places, in particular the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They see that as
that's the big
boogeyman.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the John Wick for Serbia.
John Wick. That's cool. I like that. That's all right.
Baba Yaga.
That's all right. You can do that, man. This guy. I mean, he was. Now we got to kind of lay it out. This guy was brilliant too. I mean, he was.
Well, the best douchebags are.
Oh yeah, absolutely. His father was a bloody tinsmith in Belgrade, and he ends up as an orphan, mind you. He ends up going to school, and he's so freaking brilliant. They put him into the Royal Academy there, and he is on the general staff. He's like the chief of staff for the head of the freaking army.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this is as a young man in his early 20s, because I mean he only lived to 40, mind you.
Oh yeah. So I mean he's head of Serbian military intelligence as a 30-something.
That's right, and he ran his way through there. Well, the reason he ends up as head of military intelligence is kind of
the first murders.
I was kind of leaving into that because that's a great story on and of its own.
Yeah. The Serbian coup d'état is stupendously complicated. If you want to read it in depth, it's in Christopher Clark's The Sleepwalkers. But basically, he engineers a coup and the murder of the king and queen, and replaces them essentially with puppets.
Yeah, with a different house, essentially. A competing house that was really... The guy they picked was living as a private citizen elsewhere, out of the country.
Yeah.
He's kind of like the head of, if you were to go find the head of the House Bourbon, he's a minor duke out over in France, something like that. But this guy here was just like nobody. They said, "Oh, you want me to be king? Oh, you killed the last one? Okay."
Well, right. And when you get done and you successfully kill the last one, then the next one's going to basically, hey, whatever you say, chief.
That's
no
right.
problem.
I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, no problem.
I mean,
And this, again, the source of all of this tension is over Bosnia. Bosnia was a holding of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but in 1909 they moved to actually annex it.
Right.
And
So
it
used to be part of the Ottoman Empire.
Yes.
As did Serbia.
Yes.
And Bulgaria and several others throughout here. And the Ottomans were so weak. I mean, it was unbelievable. It was called the sick man of Europe for a great reason, because they just kind of, they're gone. They don't even hardly put up a fight.
Yeah.
So
they just lose and lose and lose, and all these territories get handed off.
And that's why there's a Serbian king. It's because basically when they broke from the Ottomans, we're going to set this up, and this is in the 1800s.
Yeah.
And you have a couple of them, I mean, I don't know if I want to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, we'll stick with Dimitrijević here, but basically, yes, he engineers the coup. He replaces the king with a puppet king. The military has all the power. He runs the intelligence directorate for the military, while at the same time being called Apis, or the head of the Black Hand,
Which is an Egyptian god. That's what he's stealing. That's kind of his.
So
claim
it's
name.
like, wait, your military guy's also a terrorist? And so then, of course, anything that stuck the needle into the Austro-Hungarians, they're all for.
Yeah, because they're loosely associated with the empire, and they're afraid they're going to get gobbled up.
Yeah.
It's, which has happened
And
to
again,
many of the others.
the competition over places like Bosnia that, again, were annexed in 1909 by the empire, and they felt that was a direct threat.
Absolutely.
That puts Austro-Hungarian Empire directly on their border now,
And
without a buffer.
One of the reasons the king was assassinated to begin with is because he was very pro-Austria-Hungary, whereas the new house and Dimitrijević, they were very pro-Russia. So they're basically seeking out Russia's favor.
Yep.
And the Tsar was, Nicholas was pretty okay with that. They've been back and forth in negotiations, kind of which one is going to be our sphere of influence, and it's almost like they're courting different different husbands.
And that's a great point about him being for the Russian influence, because you got to remember these are Slavic peoples we're talking
That's exactly
about.
right, and that
so
was,
Russia is their natural
that's exactly right.
ally in that sense.
And religious ally as well.
Yes.
In fact, that was the whole point of the Black Hand and all the others was pro-Southern Slav. That we are ethnically alike. We should be there. Dimitrijević's dream was to create a Yugoslavia amongst all these other. And ironically, ironically, it did happen.
Probably not the way he would have wanted. But
He was gone by the time it actually happened.
right.
I think he would have preferred to live to see it.
Oh yeah, but he made a lot of enemies, as you might imagine.
Right. So of course he's setting up a lot of the factors of World War One. Again, this Bosnia conflict with the Austrians, this desire to see this greater Serbia that's incorporates all this territory, aligning with Slavic and Eastern Orthodox Russia, that is basically kind of a clown show of its own. When you make your number one ally is a giant mess, then you're kind of a giant mess too. But the real incident is he gets wind of some Bosnian youths want to do something big. Some Utes.
Yes, we could say Utes.
So his adjutant, his aide, whatever, Major Vojtankić, says, they want to do something. I told them they can't go to Bosnia. They can't go.
whatever you do, you cannot go there and assassinate anybody.
Exactly.
And here we go.
And Dimitrijević said, nope, I want to see him. And it ended up under his authority that Gavrilo Princip and the conspirators were provided weapons and bombs
And training.
and training and
This was not just a
allowed to slip across the border.
it's not a shoot by the hip type thing. This
Well,
was very well planned.
It's sort of. They did fail in planning on one thing. They sent him with cyanide capsules, which failed,
Yeah.
and didn't train him how to resist interrogation techniques. So basically, they spilled the beans on everything.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So when the Serbian ultimatum comes after the assassination of the Archduke, Serbia really is guilty.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
As sin, yeah.
they we can't do this as a our national sovereignty, blah blah blah. Well, yeah, but your dude really did do this.
Right, and this is something I think that is really important to note, because this is why this is such douchebaggery. All right,
Yeah.
This is not some lone gunman taking out a near head of state of some other country. This is an official in the Serbian government.
Yeah, he's head of a conspiracy to murder the soon-to-be leader of another nation, and he's
not just
part
because
of,
he was pissed at him, for serious political reasons.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That would be better for Serbia if this guy does not take, assuming World War I doesn't happen, obviously.
Yeah.
But if it were not found out that it was, that caused the war and all that, then yes, it would have been better in his mind for Serbia, for this guy to be gone. Now, obviously, it didn't end up that way. But this is real state warfare,
state-sponsored terrorism.
Yeah. And this is something I think even in our history classes, I don't remember any of his involvement ever being talked about.
No,
Right.
it was.
It's all Gavrilo Princip
Yep.
and some
And
guys
always talked about as if they acted on their own.
acted on it. They did not. They had the idea, but they had help.
It's kind of
Yeah,
like
they had help.
all the guys that got caught trying to assassinate Castro.
Well, that's right. Yeah, because the U.S. backed. The Bay of Pigs is is another type thing on that. It was essentially it's kind of the same thing. A foreign power is backing the overthrow of a
We're
particular
not
foreign government.
innocent.
Yeah, but
by any means.
well, you might make the argument that when it comes to Dragutin Dimitrijević,
Dimitrijević, yeah, that should be close enough.
yeah, we can be on a first name basis, even though he's a douchebag. So Dragutin,
Yeah, Dragutin.
you can make the argument that he was a rogue element in his government. Now I don't know how.
Yeah.
I don't know how. Obviously informed his superiors were. When it comes to Cuba and the Bay of Pigs, that was pretty much decided at the top, and we were pretty open about that.
Well, but
there is a difference.
There have been historians that are saying that the president, he informed the president and everything of the plan and all that was going on, so that it was all the way to the top.
And there's been, because if you're right, if you read through the Wikipedia article, which is remarkably detailed on this, it is such a shit show that depending on what source you're talking about, you're going to get vastly different. And a lot of these are first or second person accounts that were present. In particular, for the assassination of Alexander I, the king. Well, there's like nobody who was there. There were so many of them that they talked about it later. Nobody could come up to the real idea of what happened. I mean, the only thing they knew is they caught the king and the queen in their nightgown. They hid in a closet. They either killed them first or threw them out the window onto a manure pile. I still don't understand why a manure pile is close to the king's bedroom. You'll have to explain that part to me. But that's exactly. And they supposedly chopped off his fingers, and he's hanging, on there. It was a brutal, awful execution, and condemned by the world.
Well,
And nothing really happens. And I don't know.
Yeah, like I think there was like 2 world powers came to the funeral, like Austria and Russia.
Well, yeah, because
That's it.
Because they're the only
Everybody
ones that had a vested interest in
Yeah,
the
everybody
area.
else
That's
like
why.
you're like American diplomats are like, if we could saw Serbia off of the continent of Europe and set it adrift, we'd be in better shape.
well, I mean, the British withdrew their ambassadors. I mean, and they weren't the only one. The French did as well. I mean,
Yeah.
multiple, because this was bad stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You don't. I mean, this is not people crying for freedom. This is a literal coup d'état of the worst nature because we don't like you. And in Alexander's, I don't want to say his defense, I mean, this guy here was a messed up guy because he suspended 3 constitutions, one within an hour of itself during previous coups that he's trying to keep from happening. His father was still alive. He gave up the throne, went and lived somewhere else. He gets called back like 6 times, and then gets kicked back out again. And his mother comes back, and of course they're separated. Mom and dad are separated, and then she comes.
Well, he comes from a broken home. This is the problem.
Yeah,
right
that's,
here.
that's right.
obviously
yeah.
that's it.
So the Serbia is literally a shit show. And one of the things I want to try to tease out, Martin,
Yes.
is because we all know the old story of no villain thinks of themselves as a villain.
Right.
Yeah, there's
Every villain is the hero of his own story.
That's right. And it's, to me, we look at him as an absolute douchebag. He's ruthless son of a bitch. There's no question about that. I'd like to figure out why he does what he does. Is there anything noble in that? Potentially. We don't know his mind you.
Yeah.
But because it
Well,
seems to me
I mean,
The ultimate aims might be noble in the sense that
to bring good government in the case of the initial assassination.
let's take a step back if you don't mind. Just for
no,
a
go
moment.
ahead.
Absolutely.
So we're talking about what our generation would think of as the area that we called Yugoslavia, but that's what
Right.
it was for
Yep.
almost our entire lives up until it broke up in the 90s. And prior to that, it was independent for a while. Prior to that, you've got the Ottoman Empire, and before that, you would have had the Byzantine Empire. All of and the Holy Roman Empire, and the Byzantines, and then later the Ottomans all meet there in what is now called Yugoslavia. All right.
Yep.
So this area has been fought over, not necessarily over as in we want to take it, as in it is the battleground.
Yeah. I mean,
Or the war between Christendom, and the Muslim Ottoman Empire.
Yep.
For centuries,
Right.
and nobody who has fought in and around this area has ever been able to tame the ethnic animosities.
That's right, because they are legion. There are multiples in a very
Yes.
small area.
because it's Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia, Some of them are Catholic, some of them are
Orthodox.
Orthodox,
yeah.
some of them are kind of German leaning, some of them are Russian leaning,
And there's a Muslim population.
and then
yeah.
a Muslim population
that's right.
stuck in the middle.
Bulgaria is there, which is
Yeah.
its own animal. Transylvania.
So yeah, when the Byzantines are fighting the Bulgarians, this is the battlefield.
Exactly.
So Robert's exactly right. It's been fought over, burned,
Mm-hmm.
decimated, everything.
So wanting basically, I think the goal here, because you're asking, is there something noble?
Yeah.
I think the aim for basically saying, look, we're going to govern ourselves. Everybody else, just leave us the hell alone.
Which-
is probably the initial idea.
That's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm discerning as well.
And of course, aligning with who you see as your natural ally, the Russians,
Yeah.
as part of that. The problem is it's too many groups, as Martin laid out, in too small an area.
Yeah.
Well, because you're right. The idea being we don't want to just be Serbia. The Serbians viewed all the other ones as hicks.
Yes.
And
Right.
That's
In
the
other
nicest
words,
phrase.
we're going to.
So the Croatians and the Slovenians and all these others, the Bosnians, they're all a bunch of hicks. The Serbians, our poop don't stink, and
so they're Bella Oxmix. They got
Yeah.
to be the unity.
so
right?
they wanted this idea of this greater Serbia or Yugoslavia, however it works out.
They were flyover country.
Yeah, that was the goal because they saw themselves as something more than what they were, which is just this little bitty tiny place.
And ironically,
was
that's what
on
happened.
the way to Constantinople.
And we've just pissed off all of our audience in all of those
No.
countries.
I'm saying that's what Serbia
Oh,
thought
I
of them.
know.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's
but-
and
but
Just like the elites on the coast think of the rest of the country. It's
This is
flyover
true.
country.
yeah,
But
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, if he had been successful in doing all this the way he saw it as happening, he would have been the hero in the history books because that's the way it is with history. The ones that succeed,
he would have been the one who righted the ship.
Yes.
and brought them to their greatness,
Exactly.
as it
Yeah.
were, and brought that along. The problem is, and I think this is short-sightedness on his part. He didn't understand the rest of the world around him
No.
because of the
No.
great empires. He's too focused on his own to
I mean,
recognize that.
they're a bathtub toy in these international
Yeah,
competitions.
compared to Russia, I mean, he gets some of it because he's trying to ally himself with one of the larger powers against, Austria-Hungary, which he sees as the absolute boogeyman.
Yeah.
Well,
and
and
rightfully so in many ways.
honestly, I don't know that if he had been successful, that it could have been a long-term success. Because the parallel in my thinking was, what if Hitler had survived World War II or won it? Kept a Third Reich as a going entity. You could make the argument that, well, he was successful in his revolution,
exactly.
which thank God he was not ultimately
I agree.
successful. But you could look at this guy and think the same thing. What is he going to do to those he makes subjects?
Right. So this is, the
And I think ultimately he's going to end up like Hitler.
Oh, yeah.
yeah. I mean,
He would've.
the irony here is, especially under Franz Ferdinand, the Austrians don't want anything to do with Serbia.
That's right. And there's an
I
irony
mean,
for you.
there's,
Yeah.
and we discussed this in the World War I episodes. It's like, why would we invade Serbia? You get nothing but goats and crazy killers.
Yeah, let them
That's
go.
like,
That's probably what I mean.
yeah,
if-
just let it be.
Franz Ferdinand
know,
was far more progressive than his grandfather, and
Yes.
and
So-
then ironically, and it's they said when Anne Boleyn had her miscarriage of her male child that she has miscarried her savior. This is kind of the same thing here. They have murdered their savior because
Yeah.
he would have probably over time given in, and Serbia could have been its own independent country with its own sphere of influence. Now that's not that's not
yeah, I
quite
mean,
that
it's
cut
hard
and
to
dry.
say exactly what would have happened, but there was no interest in going any farther than Bosnia.
That's right. They're not going to. They're not going
Bosnia
to
was-
continue to gobble
Yeah, it
things up.
was the buffer zone. The Austro-Hungarian Empire is already like 15 nationalities or 13 and 15 languages, so they had no interest in. We're going to bulldoze Serbia. We're going to leave Serbia alone. We don't want nothing to do with them.
And they could have had their
But-
own Balkan War, and
Yeah.
to the winners.
Yeah.
Does Yugoslavia
So-
happen?
Okay.
I mean,
Well, maybe not, but certainly, it's an interesting point to ponder because if the Austro-Hungarian Empire basically says, all right, all Bosnia is for us, all the rest of these are for you.
Yeah.
Who fills that void? Well, Russia's on its way to a revolution.
That's right.
Actually, multiple, as we've
Mhm.
talked about many times,
Yes.
ultimately ending in the communists. The Ottoman Empire would have lasted longer than it had without World War One, but it was certainly on its last legs.
Yeah, it would have broken apart and probably
So-
come out the
Yeah.
way it ended up with Turkey as the sovereign nation, and that's it.
Right. So the question is, who fills that power vacuum?
Ah, that is the question, and that's one of the things I think
Right, and again,
Dimitrijević,
yeah.
he's wanting to be that unity.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
wanting to
He's
be that.
the
he's
short
thinking we
sighted,
can do
so-
this.
But he's looking at a very limited geographic
Yes, he
area,
is.
Yeah.
and he's going to bring chaos to that area, massive chaos.
Yeah.
Now, he's not going to see it that way,
Right,
Obviously.
pacification is the way he's going to look at it.
right? Which is a very loaded term.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I
Um,
pulled it out.
Exactly. And I think everybody around him he's going to make them just as nervous.
Do you think? And this is a question for
So
Mark.
my thing is, who's going to invade him to try and stop it?
Yeah, my question to Martin is: do you think that he would have found himself as the de facto head of state if say we did not say the assassination doesn't happen for whatever reason, and we continue forward?
No. There is a political establishment, so to speak, in
Mhm.
Serbia that does have some measure of authority and power. The Prime Minister Nikola Pacic, I think is how you say it.
Pasic, yeah, Pasic.
So I mean, he's balancing. Again, he understands. Well, I got to go along some because these dudes just shot the last guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the moderate
So
influence
he's-
that
he's
was
got-
trying to prevent, kind of
Mhm.
Yeah,
juggle all the
he's-
balls.
Yeah, he's trying to keep it from all going to pieces. And of course, you know what ends up happening. Of course, is the ultimatum comes after the assassination.
Yeah, and
Serbia was going to give in.
absolutely,
They
yeah.
were going to give 100% give in.
Mhm.
But then the Russians said, "Don't give in. We back you."
We back you. That's right.
Mhm.
And that's what
And
pushed
at the
it.
time, that was still a big stick.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, Russia was.
So, you know,
my God, you got.
Now, the hand that held it turned out to be pretty weak, but it was still a big
Yeah.
stick.
That's right. And
You know,
one couldn't conceive of a change in regime in Russia. We just couldn't. It had been
Right.
there so
Yeah.
long.
Yeah.
It had atrophied.
But it
But
right.
the rest
I
of
mean,
the world didn't know it.
it's a big stick, but it's a really skinny one.
I was going to say
Yeah.
rotten inside.
Yeah. So I
Big,
mean,
but it's rotten.
You know, you're right. The core of it is rotten, and you know he doesn't see any of this. All he sees is how can I piss off the Austrians? 'Cause
Mhm.
anything that screws them up is good for us.
Which is
And that's-
absolutely dumb because
Yeah, it is. That's the dumbest, short-sightedest
Yeah.
thing. You know, to think about it on an international stage.
yeah, because
with all
these-
this
these al-
volatility.
these alliances are well known. You
Well,
know,
the thing is, I'm so glad you put it that way, the two of you, because what can I do to hurt them the most?
Yeah.
I mean, this is not a new mode of political behavior
No.
because it happened way before him, and it still happens today.
oh yeah,
When you have
Kennedy.
sides that are so polarized, all arguments, all discussions are framed entirely in "I'm against whatever you're for,"
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
well,
and that's what's going on with him.
Right, right,
If it's
right.
good for Austria, then it obviously has to be bad for us.
well,
Yeah.
it goes back to one of my favorite Martinisms of all time: "Can't fix stupid." And that's essentially
Well-
what this is. It's a form of stupidity because
Yeah.
you should be able to see this.
Well,
but you're blinded by your own hatreds.
But you see, most people don't see beyond the end of their own nose.
Where
They don't see outside of
And-
their own thinking.
And
You're
that's
exactly
very,
right.
Very
So
true.
true.
That's what happens.
so true.
Dimitrijević.
But
and the Black
you know,
Hand.
if you are of the level of leadership that he was, shouldn't it not be the
Well,
case?
there should be a political control over all of that. So yes. So I think that we've hit
Bourbon break?
Dimitrijević pretty well. So I think it's time for bourbon break.
So, have we covered all the stuff that you wanted to cover?
Oh, absolutely.
'Cause, I
And,
mean-
and even more. Even more.
the only thing we
Because
left, we
you
did
did
leave off
great.
one thing. He ends up dying by firing squad.
Oh,
during the
yeah.
war. We
yeah.
forgot that.
Well,
Yeah.
we didn't talk about how he died, but I just want to make sure because that we covered sufficiently.
As opposed to in our country where LBJ ended up being president.
Hold that thought.
Yeah. Hold that thought.
Hold that thought.
Hold
Yes.
that thought because
So, eventually-
supposedly we're going to find out real soon.
Uh-huh.
That's
Yeah.
all that's going to be published.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
that's what I'm hoping.
So yes, as Serbia begins basically losing the war and gets invaded, and
Mhm.
they hold their own for a while, but they just get overwhelmed by the Germans and the Austrians combined. Everybody starts looking around, going, "Well, how did this happen?" Well, that guy.
Yeah.
So he's arrested and he's executed by military firing squad.
Mhm.
So he did pretty much get kind of his comeuppance, a little justice, but
Comparatively little, but yes.
yeah.
Considering how many people died in World War One, yeah.
Yeah.
You damn
But
straight,
it's-
baby.
I mean, ultimately he is if you can point to one guy,
yeah, one guy. I mean,
one man.
One man
you
with
know,
a
yeah,
vision.
As I said, the Russians are the ones that really should be blamed, not the Germans.
Right. I've
But-
never understood blaming the Germans,
but you
other
know-
than that so much of the war was fought.
What
right
what
there.
I
Yeah.
what I love is it's you've got the military intelligence basically hand feeding, baby feeding these little kids that know nothing, and getting them to commit the crime. It's kind of like the way the FBI does
I mean,
here.
they were Bosnian patriots. They considered themselves.
Well, yeah.
Bosnian but yes, if that's the important part, I want everybody to take away from this episode is how douchebag
Mm-hmm.
Gavrilo Princip did not act alone.
Exactly.
He had help, and that help was
Help,
Yeah.
funding, training,
yeah,
material.
Whole
and a-
9 yards.
an actual official of the Serbian government.
Yeah, and it's not fair for we all remember Princip, but we don't remember this guy.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's a fallacy on our
Well,
part.
all remember, I think, is probably a stretch, but
yeah,
we know there
well,
was a guy.
Princip's in the history books.
Yeah,
because he
and-
actually pulled the trigger,
Yeah.
and I think Dimitrijević just kind of isn't. So
Right, and he should be, because
Yeah.
to a large degree, Princip is a dupe.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Well said. Well said.
He-
That's
oh,
exactly
that's
right.
absolutely
I mean, you could, whether you want to say he's a Lee Harvey Oswald or
he's a
whatever,
sucker.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He is.
yeah, he's a dupe. So, bourbon break, Robert.
Bourbon break.
So before we start talking about our bourbons, I do have a small story for you guys that I think you'll appreciate.
Awesome.
Okay.
Running errands with Mrs. Martin this morning,
Mm-hmm.
and she brings up the idea of the two of us having a podcast.
Oh,
Mr. and Mrs.
So I'm like, I am totally down with this idea.
Mm-hmm.
I did, lay out for content is king.
yes.
Absolutely.
So you got to have something you want to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
But we could absolutely do this, and we could put it under the banner of Snakes and Otters.
Okay.
She's like, well, why? I said, well,
Branding is king. That's why.
branding, because we've talked about, Tom Segura and his wife started that Your Mom's House podcast.
Mm-hmm.
That now is a podcast network where they got other people to put their podcast under that banner, Your Mom's House. So the one he does with Bert Kreischer, the Two Bears, One Cave, that's under this
Mhm.
banner of Your Mom's House. So I said, all right, you need a title. So get your title going. I'm going to keep my Martin persona.
Yes, yes.
You need your content is king. I got a mic. We need another mic stand, headphones, and a task cam.
There you go.
She's open to the idea of
Very well.
buying another task cam.
Marvelous.
Wow.
Cool.
A Snakes and
Awesome.
Otters production.
So
Our first spin-off, guys.
So,
Yes.
so then we're going to have a total of 4 task cams in the house.
Basically, at our
it's
disposal, yeah.
possibly, yeah.
So we got to
Um,
definitely try hooking 2 of these together.
I tell you what, if we get one at everybody's house, then all we got to do is,
Just show up.
show up and take the
And hook it up.
the memory
Yeah.
card,
So
Yeah.
Francis, you're slacking.
Oh, we'll figure that out. We'll get there.
So it's very possible.
I mean, if Mrs. Martin is willing to go for a Tascam, maybe Mrs. Francis will be.
Mrs.
too.
Francis is marvelously progressive, so yes, she
You're
will-
just going to have to wear the kilt more often.
hey, whatever gets you to the church.
That's
on
right.
time.
That's right. Whatever it takes, baby. Whatever.
so,
Mhm.
so it's possible. It's not a definite. It's possible.
I'm excited to hear what the content. Has she any ideas what she wants to talk about?
Well, yes. I mean, as you guys know, of course, Bjorn is over the ocean,
Yes.
Mhm.
over the sea, and this is still very difficult for her.
Yes.
I mean, he has been 18 months, and she does miss him terribly.
Mm-hmm.
So she's talking about, this could be a guide about how to cope with something like this, or
Oh,
how she's doing.
Interesting.
Cool.
So yes, that's good.
Different target audience for sure.
Yeah. So, but you got to, of course, keep that going and mutate it, and keep it up to date with.
Yeah.
Well, here's what's going on right now.
That's the sort of thing that might lend itself better to seasons.
Yeah.
A series of series, basically.
Yeah,
on-
where
on
she could
certain
do
aspects
a
of things.
batch, and then when she's got more
Yeah.
to talk about, we do another batch.
Right.
Of course, there wouldn't be a bourbon break. She does not
Which is very
imbibe.
sad, but that's all right.
But we'll probably call it, doggy break, so that she could talk about what's up with Wilson the Wonder Doodle,
Well, there's that.
Penny the Dachshund. So I think there's some possibilities there. We might have to borrow a task cam just to get it off the ground,
Mm-hmm.
and then I can work on the
Well,
purchase.
now my missus has been talking about doing some podcasting, and the other thing is, my son in Amsterdam has talked about He's been willing to be a guest on our show anytime we want him
Oh, that would be
to
cool.
discuss bourbon or whatever, from
Interesting.
the other side of the pond. And then you've got your young man in Japan who could. I think he imbibes, doesn't he?
Yep.
Yeah, so we could talk about the Japanese end of things. We've got people everywhere.
Yep.
Yes,
So
we are
of course
indeed
Bjorn's
global.
established. He's already been a guest.
Mm-hmm.
So, So I think as we think about these things, then definitely spin-off.
Mm-hmm.
It's under the umbrella, presented by
Snakes and Otters, yeah.
Snakes and Otters production.
Yep. So we could have a podcast network, just like your mom's house,
Mm-hmm.
Yeehaw.
Just like your mom.
and that's why
Your
it's
mom.
called that.
That's what she said.
That's why it's called that.
Yep.
All right. So
Now back to the bourbon.
back to bourbon. Francis, sir, I believe you and Robert have the same thing. So
We
let's
do.
talk about
We've been holding on to this one for a while because Robert has said he's wanted to crack this one here. I've held it. It's the Basil Hayden 10-year. It's limited. You can still get it most places, but
Now-
less and less so.
I've not asked the sacristan, the guy who works at Beam that provided me with the basil finished in the wine casks,
Right.
which is very good, very good.
Yeah, we featured that before. Yeah.
So, is this the regular basil juice just aged for a full 10 years?
That's my understanding. That is
Okay,
correct.
okay.
Yes. Yeah. It is. It is the same. They didn't funkify it. Because all the other iterations you have the red wine cask.
Right, they finished it somehow.
They finished it very differently. You've got the malted barley. You've got the toasted. You've got the newest one's the subtle smoked. Imperator, would you care to? You want the bottle?
The other bottle.
Yeah.
I was going to go with what.
Oh, you're going to sniff what Martin had. Okay.
Yes. So I've got the complete line up there. The only other one we didn't mention was the dark rye, which we're not huge rye drinkers.
Right. And now this is it's interesting because this is still 90 proof, right?
Yeah. Same
So
proof.
it's a little weaker in proof than I tend to gravitate to, which is not a knock against it. I was just
Right.
so to me it doesn't taste as complex, but that's one of the things I like about Basil Hayden is that you get the same flavor profile every time you pour it,
That's right.
which is a good thing. That's why I call it one of our comfort bourbons.
Right. It is smooth. God,
And it is so smooth.
Yes, it is.
I think it's a little smokier. I think you get the age in the char from the barrels. I think that comes through a little bit
It
more.
does. It does.
A little,
Yeah.
a little bit of that charcoal.
Rolling it in my mouth. Yeah.
But it's got that sweetness that I come to expect from a Basil Hayden. Maybe a little citrusy.
I'm not picking that up, but I'm notoriously not good at that. It's not like a peppery in any way, but it's got a little bite.
A little.
And I think that's just the age.
Could be a mix of because it is a little bit higher rye than
Right.
than many of the ones we do. But for being a higher rye, than like some of the weeded, obviously the weeded ones we do have no rye, but it's not sharp,
Right.
and it's not super complex, but there's enough going on, I think, to keep your mouth entertained.
Oh, that's very well put.
And
I like that. Yeah.
I'm very
yeah.
much looking forward to trying it.
Yeah, I think
Not had it.
I think next episode that you're up on that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I want to see if you get the citrus taste out of it too.
Okay. So what I have poured and what the Imperator is taking a good sniff of is Blueprint. And what did you say the name of the distillery?
Old Steelhouse.
Old
Steelhouse.
Cox's
yes.
Creek, Kentucky. Literally
Yes.
just probably 25 miles down the road for us.
So the story is that these folks bought this distillery property and located the original building blueprints on the property, and have named the bourbon blueprint.
We had a good conversation. I did anyway with them at Bourbon Fest. I think most of you guys probably did too.
I don't remember if we talked with them, if I talked with them at Bourbon Fest, but I know that Martin and I talked with them at the Bellarmine Bourbon event a couple of years ago.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Now, I was not.
That's
at
where we
that one.
first discovered.
That's where we
it.
first discovered
I
it.
talked to them at Bourbon Fest on that, and they were, and they're really just kind of getting themselves back together again, starting this.
Yes,
startup.
they're. I think
This is the first of their
originally,
offerings.
yeah, I think they were doing some on contract, but now they're going to start doing their own juice, and it is, yes, it's going to be a property right there in the Bardstown area.
Mhm.
Again, we're reusing the buildings, the old buildings, and it's 100 proof. And what did it say? 6 years old.
Yeah, 6 years.
Yes.
6 years,
Uh,
and boy, it's good.
I'm telling you, it's
70
one of my go-tos these days.
75% corn, 21% rye, and 4% malted barley.
So it's kind of a mid rye,
Yeah,
not a high, not a super
Well,
high, but
Super
kind
high,
of a
but
mid.
I think
21's pretty
I
heavy.
think that's pretty high. I mean,
Yeah.
there are not many that go above that, but there
No.
are
Yeah.
plenty that go lower than
Yeah,
that.
there's
Yeah.
there's a few that are 30, so that's good stuff, and it's very mellow for a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
And
6
for a
years
rye,
to me is that's if I
Sweet-
can help it,
sweet
that's
spot.
my starting point.
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
kind of a sweetie, yeah, because it's about I like the 10-year, but
Yes, I
What do you
prefer
say?
something in that 10-year range.
6, 7 to 10 is usually good stuff.
You know, anything in that 4 to 6, it just depends.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I tend to think of those more as mixing bourbons, but not always. What was it, winter rye or whatever it was in that Jim Beam orange bottle.
yeah.
I never can remember the name of it. That's really good. That's 6 years, which for a Beam is unusual because those are normally a standard 4. But there's nothing wrong with a Jim Beam. That's a very very
Yeah.
fine
Absolutely. Yeah.
bottle. But that extra couple of years, it does make a difference.
So this is very smooth, very mellow 6-year blueprint.
Any tasting notes?
Yeah, I get a little. I feel like it tastes a little, almost like a little milk chocolate to it,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe with a little nuttiness in it.
Mhm.
Interesting.
So it's not real sweet, but it's fairly sweet for a rye
Yeah.
bourbon.
Interesting.
It does not hit real hard on pepper notes to me at all.
Well, that's
No.
good.
For rye, that
Which is interesting
unusual.
for only having 4% malted barley to
Yeah.
kind of tamp that down. That's pretty interesting. Yeah.
So I guess it's still plenty of corn at 70,
Right.
whatever it
Oh,
is.
yeah.
So but it seems to balance really nicely.
75% corn, I think.
Yeah, 70. So it seems to balance really nicely.
What'd you
Yeah.
get on the nose? there?
Well, the surprise was you don't really get the peppery. It does have that high corn sweetness to it,
Mhm.
and I don't know, something about it is there's something odd about it. And I can't
Odd
quite
bad or
grab it.
odd good?
No, it's
Just kind of
okay.
yeah,
Unique.
unusual.
Something odd is in unique.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it smells mellow. It really does.
Yeah,
it
so
doesn't-
I'm anxious for you guys to try and see
Yeah.
what you think. But
Yeah,
I feel
this
like
is actually
it's-
this is actually the second bottle. We
Ooh.
downed the other one.
Oh wow.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
I don't think I told you this. Yeah. Oh yeah. Just we hadn't opened this, but because I had replaced it, but I drank the other one, and it was spectacular. Because I don't usually drink that much of this stuff, but
Mhm.
that's kind of become my go-to. Now I've got a lot of others I'm trying to.
What's the
Well, I can
retail on this one?
understand that.
I want to say 60,
Okay.
if I best I remember. It's harder to find. I'll tell you that.
Yes.
I had to
yes.
get it at Evergreen in Bardstown.
Okay.
But
Excellent place to shop.
yeah, we
Excellent.
very much.
That it is.
You can usually find most anything there. But I sense nothing but good things for them
Mhm.
as
Yeah.
they move
So
forward.
to me, it does differ from that Heaven Hill bottled in bond.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
we loved, nice and sweet. But again, this one feels like maybe that sweetness is tempered a little bit, maybe with some nuttiness.
Yeah.
So it really it's got kind of that really nice sort of velvet caramel chocolate sweetness, but tempered
Yeah.
just a bit with
You
maybe
had me
some,
at caramel.
some almond or something
Well,
like
but
that.
I-
Very
It's
interesting.
really
I'll be
good.
happy to see what that does when I try
Can
it again.
I think I figured it out. It's unusual with such a low barley to have it come across as heavy as it does in it.
Okay.
It does have that. That's what I'm thinking of. Malt balls.
Malted milk balls.
Malted
Malted
milk
milk balls
balls.
with
Yeah.
chocolate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what I was picking up.
Okay.
Interesting.
Okay.
Interesting. All right. Well,
Yeah.
well,
That's that the kind of chocolate, but with some nuttiness to it.
Yeah.
well, I think next episode, Robert and I are going to go that way, and we'll see.
Yes,
we'll
yes,
see if we
definitely.
pick up what you guys do, and we're going to kind of switch, and you'll try
Right.
the other.
Yeah.
Right.
And see.
Next time, I'll have a story. I'll talk about my trip to Buffalo Trace.
Oh,
okay.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Rather than extend this bourbon break, we'll talk about it in the next
Okay.
episode.
Cool.
So good. Well, I appreciate you all encouraging Mrs. Martin.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I've already looked up what her nom de pod would be.
Oh, excellent. Can you reveal it here, or do you want to wait?
No, we can say because I mean anybody can look up what Martin Luther's wife's name was.
I know what
Okay.
The former nun.
you should
Yes.
invest in a new mic for her. I think a Newman U87 would be great for her.
And how many hundreds of dollars? Is
That's
that?
okay.
Oh no, about $4,000.
We've got a mic. I got extra mics. I got extra cables. I need to get her headphones and a stand.
Good headphones, a
Uh-huh.
good stand. Yes.
and,
she'll
a,
need
and,
a
a
stand.
task cam. That's what.
And then we're like I said, I might have to borrow a Tascam initially to get this off the ground, but we may be expanding the snakes and otters world.
Well, the microphone that we used to use, the USB with the laptop, with just two of you sitting across from one another,
Yes, it could
would
work
work
too.
just
Yeah, that
fine.
would
Not a
work
bad
fine.
idea.
Yeah.
But, I want to kick the audio quality up.
Yeah. I'm just
Kinda
saying,
like once you've
wants-
gone where we're going,
he
you
wants-
can't go back again.
Yeah, he's been spoiled.
I know. We discovered
It's
the
true,
quality
it's true.
differences.
And with
that much.
3 of them between us,
Mm-hmm.
well, we might be able to work this out.
Yeah.
so all right. Well, on to
On to
good
our
Marshall.
next.
Marshall Petain.
Mm-hmm.
So Petain is I'm just not even sure where to start with him. He's a hero.
Oh yeah,
He
he's
starts out as
the savior
as
of
a real
France. He
hero.
was called. Yeah, by the end of the war, he's the one that ends up in command of the French forces at the end, all the way
Of
through.
World War One.
Of World War
World
One.
War One.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
right, he's he's a career officer in the French army. Becomes the hero of Verdun. He's the
Mhm.
one who, instead of just leaving the men there to be chewed up, cycles the divisions through so that nearly every soldier in the French army ends up serving at Verdun at one time or another, and they manage to grind down the German offensive there. He gets again eventually promoted to essentially the same position as Haig and Pershing under the direction of Foch. Foch becomes the generalissimo, they call him. But he is commander of the French forces. He quells the mutiny.
Right.
You
yeah.
know,
And a lot of that is due to his own personality, because they had been the mutineers had been under Joffre. They were neglected to death, and they brought in Nivelle for a while, and he just slaughtered them so quickly. They'd had enough, and Petain became the soldier's soldier. That's what he was called. Is
Right.
that I care enough about you. I'm not going to let you. We're going to do what we need to do.
yeah,
But I'm never going to abandon you. I'm never going to
yeah.
use
You're
you.
not gonna let him get chewed up.
No,
anymore.
we're going to figure out a way to do this that it's better. And he was good as his word.
Yeah, I mean,
the
he-
men
he-
essentially loved him at the end.
more leave time, more time away from the front, the whole bit. He did a whale of a job and really rescued the French position in World War One. Of course, in the interwar years, is a enormous political failure for the French.
Yeah, well, he was a fairly he's not that old at the end of World War One. I don't have that number in front of me. I'm gonna look it up.
Well, he would have been
He's
probably
about
Yeah, he's
50 to
65,
60. Yeah.
he's I want to say he's so
because he's in his 80s by the time of World War II. So
yeah, and
he's
it's-
about 60. He in the interwar years he stays in the military. He is in and out of government a bit. I think he spends
Serves a minister twice.
yeah he serves as Minister of Defense or whatever they wanted to call it. But of course the French governments are falling about every 20 minutes, cycling through ministries and ministers and presidents and all this other stuff.
Sounds an awful lot like post-revolution.
Yeah,
in
I mean,
many
it's
ways.
just not stable. Of course, and the French built it that way. They just didn't build it stable.
They wanted to be able to do away with it if somebody got their nose out of joint. Problem is, anybody could get their nose out of joint. And then
Well, it's the problem with one of the problems with a
parliamentarian system.
parliamentarian system
That's right.
Yeah,
is that it can have huge, immense stability, but it's almost impossible to get there.
Yeah, you've got to
Yeah, and
essentially
there's-
be a stable people, and the ministers.
Are you saying the French are not a stable people?
Well, I'm trying to somehow come. I'm trying
Excuse
to.
me?
There's. Yeah, I know. You're.
Well,
he's
For
our friend.
example,
For example. Okay.
example.
Well, I'm trying to. I'm trying in my mind to show the difference between because the British parliamentary system is inherently stable, because
Oh no.
well,
well, I mean, but even
yeah,
when,
it is.
it pretty much is. Even when they have votes of no confidence, then
There's a relatively orderly transfer of
the
power.
king. Usually it's the king or queen. So okay.
Well,
we're
and
gonna-
I think
we're gonna
that's
do this.
part of the problem. Parliament and the monarchy have always been linked, whether contentiously so or not,
Right.
when it comes to England. And
Yeah.
there is no executive. I mean,
Well, there is the president.
it's not the
But
same.
that's,
But it's
that's
not the same.
basically as unstable as the prime minister too.
Because
Right.
prime
They go in and
ministers
out.
change, when the government
Yeah,
changes, but
yeah.
the president is, at least in the,
Well,
it's
but
They're
supposed
lucky to
be-
last a couple of years. The cats last longer at Downing Street than they do.
The thing with in France, the president can be gone at the next election.
Right.
The monarch in England, you got to wait for him to
Yeah.
die or resign.
They're there for a while.
Yeah, and so and that is one of the things that I think is the unappreciated genius of British parliamentarian system is that you've got that stability in the figure of the monarch.
Right.
There's also not as much fragmentation amongst the voting populace in Britain either.
They're more homogeneous, you would say?
Well, and there are
Fewer parties.
fewer parties,
Yeah.
fewer factions, and fewer things to represent. Because somebody from London doesn't really feel that they're all that much different from somebody from Wales or that's in the farmland. But in France, somebody from Paris thinks they're completely different from somebody in some farm in
Provence.
Burgundy and Provence. Yeah. So they don't even see themselves as going in the same direction.
And that's an historical difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whoever holds Paris holds the country.
Mhm.
Whereas in England, the country can rise up in the various houses that are spread out all across the country and rise up against the king as happened.
As has
many
happened,
times.
yeah.
Yeah.
many times,
So
yeah.
there's more of a balance between.
Yeah, there's very much more a balance and a feel of common direction in Britain than there is in France.
Also, being on
And
an island, it's a lot easier to see
Yeah.
us against everybody else.
Yeah, and France, has they very factionalized and Greens that dress like forest elves and communists and proto-communists and quasi this and quasi that and all these different parties, and it's just inherently unstable. You can't put together enough ministers from any one group to
Nobody
really,
get, because
really
nobody
have
gets,
a government because as soon as you do,
nobody gets along.
yeah, then the guy that you brought in the coalition goes, well, you know what? I don't like what you're doing because I brush my teeth with my left hand and you brush your teeth with your right hand. So I'm out of the government. So then the whole thing falls apart. And
Sounds like a Monty Python skit.
I was going to say, I
know,
would think this would appeal to Martin greatly
Yeah.
because the government can never get anything done.
well, but it leads to then when someone like Petain comes along, again, he gets a lot of credit. He's the hero, but in the interwar years, he grows more and more authoritarian.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's seen the changes and he recognizes
Right.
we're effing each other up over and over and over again. The only solution in his mind is it's no different than after the revolution. It was Napoleon. In this case, it's after the war. It's Petain.
Right. So as they get to World War II and they're invaded and blitzkrieg and
Yeah,
winning,
and
they
and
have
France
no-
falls within a month.
yeah, they have no chance of defending themselves. They
The Maginot Line is a joke. Hitler
Yeah.
goes around
Well,
it.
the interesting thing about the beginning of World War II with France is that their army was better equipped than everybody thinks.
Oh, absolutely.
They actually had more tanks
Mhm.
than the Germans. Now, quantity can be a quality
Well,
of its
they
own,
were
but
they were garbage tanks though, and they were everything the French had was antique.
well, but this is my point that they're I'd take 5,000 tanks versus two, even if they're antiques. If over the nothing, but the
Well,
problem is
No aircraft though.
they didn't use them right. They weren't deployed because they had no modern
They had no
military
Yes,
strategy.
They had no
yeah,
will.
De Gaulle was the
Can we say
one
that?
saying, "Hey, these tanks need to be grouped, not spread out," and nobody
Yes.
listened, including Petain.
Well, Petain didn't really have any balls. I mean, he turned over to the Germans way too easy. I mean,
Well,
Well,
that's
Well,
where I
that's
was
why
going,
he was
yeah.
given the position he was, though.
I know.
Yeah, because he was
'Cause-
respected, and they thought this
Yeah.
is a perfect puppet.
Well, no. The guy who had his position in the government before,
Mm-hmm.
when it looked like the defeat was imminent, he resigned and said, "You need to put Petain in charge."
Yeah, they
Right.
did.
Precisely so he could be the face. Probably the other guy resigned because,
Yeah.
like, look, I don't want to be the guy that has to surrender.
Surrender, right?
Just
I'm on my way to Quebec.
But-
See
right.
you
It was,
later.
it was
He
for
was
looks.
appointed to surrender.
he was.
Yeah, I
So-
mean,
He
it was
was.
for
So
looks.
you can't say he had no balls. His job was not to have balls.
Well, yeah, but I think he was kind of a pawn in that.
Well, the
That's
balls
what
had,
I'm sa- well,
yeah,
yes.
I agree.
the
with
balls had been cut away and taken back to Berlin at this point.
Oh, yeah.
So it doesn't really matter who you put in this position.
No, but
And-
he was the one who ended up being the scapegoat.
Well, and justly
but
so.
he
Justly
was-
so.
Therein lies the
He
question
was
that I think
not
Martin's,
entirely a scapegoat, though.
No.
Here's the thing.
here's where we go.
Here's
This
the
is what
thing,
I
yeah.
want.
This is
where I
where he
want Martin to go.
crosses the line from unfortunate loser to douchebag.
That's what I'm waiting for.
Is- Again, he is given control of only part of France.
Yeah,
The Germans
Vichy.
do occupy the majority of France, but there is this rump state, this Vichy state, that Pétain is in charge of. And again, that
Mhm.
very much he is asked to take over the government as this
The
for
French leader.
looks,
Yeah.
Yeah.
basically for looks, because he's the hero. He can surrender honorably. But what they do is, and this is basically at Petain's direction,
hmm
they go ahead and throw the Constitution away, and they want to make a new one. But he basically ignores it as well,
hmm
and he doesn't become head of government. He is called head of state.
Yes.
Yes, it is no longer the French Republic. It is the French state.
Is the
Mhm.
French state?
Right, which is something that has gone
And-
against the French hackles
Yeah.
ever since Louis Philippe, who
Mhm.
was no longer king of France but king of the French. They're
Yeah.
that
So it
revolutionary
becomes-
mindset is
yeah.
still embedded
Yeah.
in them at this time.
So he becomes the head of state, the French state, what's left of it, and then goes into full-on collaborationist mode,
hmm
and they basically abandon fraternité, égalité,
Liberté.
liberté, égalité, fraternité, and make it family work and
Yeah,
fatherland, family work and fatherland.
hmm
You don't get much more German than that.
Sounds pretty German to
exactly,
me, yeah.
exactly. And so it's full on collaboration. It's full on. I'm in charge. I'm
Well,
now the authoritarian.
I am the
for the
state.
French
Dare I
state.
say that?
I do wonder because of his age, because I mean, just think about a recent head of state that we might all be familiar with. So Pétain was 84 when he was made prime minister and has to surrender and
Mhm.
becomes the head
Yeah.
of Vichy France. I wonder at how much mental acuity the man still had at 84.
According to
And now he
people
lived
in
another 16 years.
yeah,
He lived
according to
until
people in the
54.
government, he was with it. He was there. It was not until much, much, much later. He did go that route. He did eventually mentally decline severely. He was in a hospital, but it was that's the war.
Yeah, that
And
was
that's why
after
they
his,
kind of commuted his
Yeah,
death
that-
sentence.
that's
after
why
his
they didn't tell
imprisonment.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, he lasted 11. He died in 51, so it was
Yeah.
just 11 years
But
after he
he-
became. But
he-
95.
he basically did essentially go, I'm not just the face here. I'm going to take the joint over. And he had this really, really strong authoritarian streak in him, very old school, and basically felt the Republic was a failure. And because of his experience in the interwar years where he couldn't get what he wanted, they had no airplanes, the antique weapons for the troops. Everything was a
constantly
mess.
infighting. You could
Yeah,
get anything.
no defense budget. They all knew the Germans were
Well,
going to
Margaret
come
Thatcher would have
back.
called that the absolute absence of leadership.
And so he wanted to then be that kind of iron leader again,
Mhm.
and be that strong leader.
A la,
And then
a la Napoleon.
Yeah, and then it was like, we don't need you to do that, dude. All you need to do is do what Berlin tells you. And
Well, and he
Yeah.
only had the southeast of France for 2 years.
Yeah.
At November of 42, Italy and Germany, they occupy the entirety of the country.
Yeah.
So,
and they start shipping him from place to place.
so he is no longer even truly head of state after
Yeah.
that.
But he cooperated with the Gestapo,
Mhm.
arranged for
See, and that's the damning thing.
yeah,
yeah.
Ding,
he
ding,
arranged for the deportations
Of the Jews.
in Southeast France. He didn't have to, but he did. He arranged, and
and that's what earns him the medal of douchebag.
yeah.
Mhm.
So it's
He's seen as a tragic figure here, 60, 80, 80 years later. I'm not sure that that's quite fair. I think so many times he's portrayed as someone who had no real choice in that, and I think that is an absolute mistake.
yeah.
He did make
had
choices,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and it's history.
Yeah, at
has
his
judged
age, he could have turned down the position. Absolutely.
Yeah, and
Like, I've given my all for king and country. Well, president and country.
Yeah, I've done everything I could for France. Somebody else will have to surrender. You politicians that screwed this pooch, you can't get out of it.
Mhm.
But he didn't do that. He took it on
some of me
because he
understands that
knew he would
he thought he had a vision.
he would have
that he could somehow hold things together. I mean, again, I'm very interested in he doesn't see himself as a villain. He doesn't see himself as a collaborator until it's kind of like cooking the frog. Sooner or later, you have to realize, yeah, I'm cooked. I am that thing, and I'm very interested in. I'd love to hear his own, late in life apologies if he ever made one, discussions and all that stuff. But most of that stuff we don't know. We never got any
I
of
mean,
that.
I don't think he ever had any regrets over how he did it.
Well, see that to me that earns him the douchebaggery, even though
Yeah.
he was he was the savior of France, in 1918.
He wanted to go. He wanted to turn the clock back.
He wanted to go back to
he-
what, Napoleon? I mean,
He
that's
wanted.
without the
He wanted to
conquest.
go. He wanted to change the ideas behind the Republic and the Revolution, and
Mhm.
I think he came to see that. All right, we'll surrender. I'll hold this Vichy rump state, but eventually, maybe I'll get the whole country back, and we'll just walk in lockstep with Germany because a lot of what they're doing is stuff I want to do anyway.
See, there you go.
Mhm.
And I wonder how much that tainted him, because he's essentially deciding, this Hitler guy ain't so bad, and that's what ultimately dooms
Well-
him to douchebaggery. I love that word.
The again, because I certainly am no fan of Petain, but trying to put myself in the position, especially at his age. Granted, he lasted until he was 95, so it's not like he was totally infirm. I still don't know that I'm still not willing to say he was fully and completely in charge of his mental faculties as late as 84 years of age. But probably mostly, if there are enough people to say, yeah, he seems to know what's going on. But I imagine that Petain could be used as a good model for Londo Malari.
Malari. Oh yeah, I would say the guy that wants something that he shouldn't want, but he doesn't realize it until he gets it.
Well, you could make the argument that Petain, like Londo, is a patriot.
That's correct. There's no question as to that. Yes, I
And
think you're
he's
exactly
trying
right.
to do the best he can in the worst of circumstances.
Uh-huh, absolutely.
Up to a point.
Until he brings
Until
himself.
I think he crosses the line, though.
Well, I'm not saying he doesn't. I'm not saying Londo didn't.
Londo absolutely
line,
did,
yeah.
and he recognized it later. and I
But
wonder-
what I'm saying is, unlike a Victor Von Doom, which if you want to talk about douchebags, I think you can call him a douchebag too.
Yeah.
Even though because he's a man of great evil and could have gone the other way, and that's part of what makes somebody a douchebag. Is
Yep.
you make deliberate decisions to go the wrong way. But sometimes you don't start out with that Like
Right,
like a
I-
Doom starts out with that. Oh, I'm a douchebag from the very beginning,
Yeah, let me
Right.
show you. Yeah.
and let me show you why, because I am so superior. Whereas somebody like Alonso Mollari, if you're familiar with Babylon 5, you'll get that. But or somebody like a Petain, you start out thinking, I'm trying to do the best I can to save my country.
Yeah.
And of course, where he goes wrong is that he never stops trying to make it better without realizing I'm doing the same thing over and over, and it's just getting worse.
Yeah.
And
Well, but he ended up with a corrupt vision of what France should be.
Yeah, cracked mirror version.
Yeah. He he wanted to save the country, but that he did not want to save the republic. He didn't want to save
yes.
what the people had built. He wanted to rebuild it
In his image.
in a style that he felt suitable.
Yeah, in his.
And it was not a good look.
Well, that's
Again,
on
it
Doom
was-
101 right there. Build it in your image. and
It
that's
was
what he
very
did.
much an old school. We need to be kind of this military, not really. Well,
almost a military junker type.
yeah,
well,
yeah,
patterning
almost
himself
that
after Prussia.
military dictatorship, Hindenburg kind
Yeah,
of.
Prussia, all that stuff. Yeah.
or not Hindenburg, but
Bismarck.
Bismarck.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
I can
this
see
kind
that.
of Iron Duke sort of rule over France. And it's like that's not what France is anymore.
No, and the French people aren't that and haven't been. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, even since Napoleon, essentially.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, okay.
This is.
I think we got way more mileage out of it than I thought we would. So
Told you we would.
I had faith. I had faith, brother. I had faith.
I thought I would, do the quick brief on Dragutin and we wouldn't have anything to talk about, but we did great. So super episode, fellas. Francis, buddy, what is next time?
We're going to go code of honor next time here. I have not told the guys. It's as the host this time. I get to choose. I've got, and to be honest, I haven't even picked yet. I've got several really great options. So I'm just
Way to go, channeling your inner Robert.
absolutely. So we're going to make this thing here something totally cool and totally unexpected. So be here next episode.
We hope you enjoyed another pointless discussion of eternal questions. Remember, new episodes drop every second and fourth Friday at 6 a.m. Eastern, just in time for your morning commute. And every fifth Friday, we drop a special Hoopajube episode. Spread the word we are on all the major platforms, and leave us a review. That helps others find us. We're also on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, as well as our website, snakesandotters.com. Join us next time, same snake time, same otter channel.